Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, How to Delay Your Next NAS Expansion with Cloudian and Komprise. Joining us today is Krishna Subramanian, co-founder and COO of Komprise. For over 25 years, Krishna has held key roles at large companies and startups alike, including the VP of Marketing for the Cloud Platforms Group at Citrix, COO of Kavisa Mergers and Acquisitions at Sun Microsystems Cloud Business, and CEO and co-founder of Covair, to name a few. Also joining us today is Sanjay Jagad, Senior Director of Products and Solutions at Cloudian. Sanjay began his career as an engineer writing firmware. He brings a wealth of knowledge and diverse experience in product marketing and product management, spending the last 20 years using the latest technologies and storage to help customers build dynamic IT infrastructures. Welcome, Krishna and Sanjay.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Before we begin, I just wanted to point out again to the audience that we'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So please enter any questions that arise in the question box at the side of your screen. With that, I will hand it over to Sanjay.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody on the call. Let's start with something which is top of the mind for a lot of IT guys, right? With all the popularity of rich media, the proliferation of mobile devices, the digitization of content, and there has been this exponential growth in the amount of unstructured data that the IT has to manage, right? As you can see in this chart, within the last 2 years, 90% of this data that we're talking about in terms of this exponential growth was created in the last 2 years, and this trend is going to continue. This unprecedented growth and the unstructured content is simply not sustainable for our current NAS and SAN infrastructures. As you can see from the chart, and we talked about, right, this is going to get amplified as newer technologies like come in. We're talking about IoT and other workloads, social media, workloads where lots and lots of data gets created in a way that is not structured, that needs to be stored for a long period of time for various reasons, right? This is something that needs to be addressed. So if you ask what is the top of the mind challenges with a lot of those IT practitioners, right? The IT practitioners are always under the pressure to accommodate this unprecedented growth, right? Managing the growth, making sure that that data is accessible and needed, and it's available as and when customers demand for it. That is not easy, right? We're talking about doing the same thing while managing the cost associated with storing this data. The return on investments that you have with your existing infrastructure, how do I get the most out of it? How do I still manage to reduce the business risk associated with it? Right? Those are the things that we will address in today's call. I'm pretty sure most of you guys are seeing this in your own IT environments. Are you faced with similar challenges that needs to be addressed? Like, you have spent millions of dollars on your tier 1 NAS storage, and that needs to be now accounted for, right? The traditional legacy SAN storages are not going to be able to account for this growth for various reasons, be it the file system limitations, be it the very nature of how the data is laid out. And that's where the solution that we're talking about today comes into the picture, right? Today in this webinar, we're going to talk about how you can take advantage of this new approach, a solution that combines the advancement in storage when you're talking about scalable storage based on object technology, and then a way to integrate the highly efficient, scalable data movers to take advantage of tiering within your existing environments and take advantage of these new technologies, right? Deployed together, as you can see in this particular diagram, Komprise and Cloudian provide a robust tiering solution that enables customers to easily optimize their primary storage and move their inactive data, static data that has been aged, that has been sitting there on their tier 1 storage that adds to the cost of storage into something which is much more price efficient, much highly scalable, while still maintaining and supporting your existing service level agreements, right? Organizations can create custom policies that define when the data should be migrated based on standard metadata files, access times, and various different things. And we'll walk you through a demo. We'll walk you through individual technologies so that you have a clear view of the value this solution is going to provide. But before we go there, let's talk about individual technologies. What is Cloudian? What does Cloudian do? Cloudian Hyperstore. So just to give you a little bit of a context, right? Cloudian provides an on-prem, highly scalable storage platform which leverages object storage technologies in terms of laying out the data. And why that is important? There are two main reasons that needs to be considered out here. When we are talking about unstructured data and the scale of data that needs to be stored, the existing file systems cannot provide that scale. This is where object data comes into the picture. It provides a very flat layout, which allows you to now store huge amount of data, which has rich metadata associated with it, so that now you can not only just store the data, but be also able to look up that data for various reasons and be able to retrieve the data as and when you need it while maintaining your SLAs. The other aspect is when you're talking about how the IT technologies are evolving and the applications are evolving, a lot of those applications are now built in cloud, and they talk cloud protocols. In this particular case, we're talking about Amazon S3, which has standardized the way those applications talk to the storage in Amazon. We call that S3 protocol or S3 APIs. And that is something that we bring to the table by offering an on-prem solution that supports the same existing APIs and protocols that Amazon is standardized on, right? As I mentioned earlier, the object store not only just allows you to scale the Cloudian platform. The difference between different object store is that the Cloudian platform allows you to start small and then grow seamlessly. The unique peer-to-peer architecture allows you to continuously grow and scale this environment while making sure that the data is highly available and you're still be able to access your data all the time. So what are those feature sets that we are talking about that makes us so unique? As I mentioned earlier, the first thing that is very unique is the ability to support and offer the guarantee that any application that uses Amazon ecosystem or at least talks Amazon S3 will be 100% compatible when you build this on-prem storage, right? This is very unique to Cloudian. This is something that we do and our customers appreciate because this gives them seamless transition for all their applications that they build in cloud to run them on-prem. When we talk about scale, we need to talk about the ability to host multiple tenants so that they can have secure isolation of data between those tenants and quality of service associated with it, right? We make sure that not only do that, but also one of the things that our customers highly value is the ability to provide statistics and metering capabilities that allow customers to know exactly who's consuming what kind of storage and other resources, right? When we talk about scale, data protection becomes of utmost concern. We do multiple data protection schemes. We can do replication, integrated replication of data where you have copies of data. We can do erasure coding so that you can get more return on your storage in terms of raw versus usable and be able to still have the same protection levels that you've been used to for your tier 1 storage. Tiering, right? A lot of IT practitioners, the first thing that top of the mind is, how do I take advantage of cloud, right? How can I want to go to cloud, but I don't know how, right? what this solution does is allows you to take that first step. Right now, when you have this on-prem storage, now we have an integrated ability to move and tier the data into the cloud, cloud of your choice, be it Amazon, be it Google, or even Azure. So that is an easy transition for you towards your hybrid cloud storage. And last but not the least, when we say object-based storage, does not mean that we do not support files, right? We can support files and object on the same single box. So this is something that offers the most comprehensive set of functionalities that you would look for a storage platform. We call this a platform for all your data other than your tier one, because we are not talking about tier one applications in this particular case. All your unstructured data, be it, and we'll talk a little bit about the different use cases as we move forward. Now, the question is, how do I get access to this? How do I consume this, right? So we have different ways you can incorporate this technology into your data center. First thing first, in order to provide the most integrated experience, most seamless experience, we have our own appliance that is running on our own hardware with our own hyperstore software. So we do end-to-end support for hardware and software. The second option, which is gives you the utmost flexibility, is the ability to run consume our software on your own existing hardware, right? This runs on commodity servers to get you the maximum value of investment that you have already made on your infrastructure that you have in your data center. And last is if you want the same cloud-like experience on your private cloud and you want to consume this storage, we have an ability to run this as metered capacity by capacity. So you have the flexibility now to consume this object store in different forms that best fits your need. Let's talk a little bit about in terms of configurations, right? I keep talking about the offering an on-prem solution. The other thing that is very inherent part of our storage policies is the ability to do multi-site, right? And have integrated DR. At Cloudian Hyperstore, what we can do is, as we set up your policies for data protection, what we can do is we can also let you have different copies be stored in different sites so that now you can get integrated DR as well as your data protection. A lot of our managed service providers use our technology to offer storage as a service so that they can get you the same Amazon S3 kind of functionality, but in a very local managed service provider setting, so that your data governance and other needs around data sovereignty are taken care of. And the last, as I mentioned earlier, this gives you the step towards hybrid cloud. So you get started with on-prem and have the ability now to tier to cloud. This gives you the utmost flexibility, the utmost scale, the best data protection. And as I said, right, this solution now becomes your be-all, end-all storage for a lot of your unstructured data that you're going to be storing as we move forward. So what are the different use cases that we see in the industries, right, where people have consumed this, or we have customers who use the storage? And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the first one is storage as a service, be it in your own enterprise cloud or through a managed service providers who want to offer same Amazon-like storage as a service capabilities for their tenants. We have great success within the media and entertainment industry, where you're now talking about unprecedented amount of digital assets that needs to be stored and managed and archived. If you guys haven't looked at it, a few weeks back when Cloudian was at NAB, we talked about one of our premier customers, and you guys probably already familiar with it, Saturday Night Live. That particular customer stores 40 years of their different episodes and different media files on Cloudian that allows them not only just to archive that, but also create custom shows or custom assets by pulling different media files at will based on the unique ability of object store and metadata search that allows them to create dynamic content and distribute those dynamic content through different channels. The thing that we're talking about in today's webinar, the file tiering, this is becoming a more prominent use case for various reasons, right? Now, if you look at the amount of NAS, the storage that is out there, the life cycle of NAS storage, where you have to now go refresh cycles every 3 years and be able to scale that, and the complexity associated with scaling your NAS boxes, be it NetApp, be it AMC, be it other vendors, it's not easy, right? And those solutions charge come at a premium cost, like when you talk about tier 1 storage. But the root of the problem is how much of that data is something that you access regularly. How much of that is cold data versus hot data? How much of that data can be easily tiered off to something that is like Cloudian, so that you can still continue using your tier 1 storage and get the most return on investment? And that's what we'll talk about. And the last being analytics. This is something that is coming up, more of a future looking area. Now we're talking about metadata and an object store, which allows you to now do tagging of assets and do various different things so that you can run those different analytics application and machine learning kind of things on an object store platform, so that you can derive more intelligence and be able to take advantage of data that you already have. Data is now no longer just something that you need to store. Data is what drives your business. Data has value that you can now derive and add to the company's bottom line. So this is something that is, stay tuned and watch for more use cases around that. With this introduction, I'll pass the ball to Krishna, who can talk a little bit about Komprise, and then we'll go and talk about solution.
Sounds great, Sanjay. Thank you. And as Sanjay mentioned, there's a lot of data out there. Data is growing fast, and a lot of that data is unstructured file data, and it's sitting on primary storage. And quite often, it's getting replicated on primary storage, and you're also having snapshots and backups on primary storage. So you may have 4 to 6x of the original data footprint all sitting on primary storage, and clearly that's inefficient. So imagine if in 15 minutes you could get a view into all your data on your current storage, and you could see how much of that data is truly being used, how much of that data is cold, who's using it, and how fast it's growing. That's the analysis that Komprise gives you. So Komprise is software that is very complementary to Cloudian. It's an analytics-driven data management software, and it's software that first gives you a view into your data and shows you how your data is growing and being used. And then based on policies that you can set, Komprise moves and replicates and provides transparent access to that data so that you can leverage a solution like Cloudian seamlessly in your environment without any changes to your users or applications. I'm going to show this to you through a live demo, and just to give you some background on what you're going to see in the demo, we're going to show you how Komprise does analysis of your shares and how you can project the impact of your different policies and the ROI that you're going to get before you even move any data. And to just give you an idea of how the Komprise architecture is set up, Komprise is a scale-out architecture, and it requires no dedicated infrastructure. It essentially runs as one or more virtual machines in your environment. So you don't need to make any changes to your storage architecture. You don't need to put any agents on your storage. You make no changes to your hot data path. Komprise is completely running in the background, non-intrusively. And all you need to do is put up a Komprise observer virtual machine, It's a lightweight virtual machine. You bring it up in your environment and literally point it at your storage, and you can get started. And to scale that environment, let's say you do a POC with us and Cloudian, you get an assessment on your data, you like what you see and you want to go forward. Going from POC to production simply involves adding some more observers to scale the footprint. There's no other change required. So with that background, I'm actually going to switch and show you the demo itself so you can see how the product works. And as Laura mentioned in the beginning, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the questions window so we can answer them at the end, and some of it we may be able to touch on even as we do the demo. So here's a demo of how the comprised environment looks. Here, what we've done is we've downloaded that comprised observer VM and powered it on. And once you power it on, you literally come to this management console in your browser, and you can start adding shares. So essentially, you're pointing comprise at shares that you wanted to look at. So in this example, we have pointed comprise at some isolons, some NetApp 8 clusters, some NetApp 7, some Windows servers, etc. So literally, you give the IP address of the storage that you wanted to look at. You click on Discover Shares. Komprise finds all the shares that are on that storage, and you pick the ones you want to look at. Once you do that, and the whole thing takes less than 15 minutes, you start seeing analytics. So in this example, we have 5 shares that we're looking at, and there's about 195 terabytes of data across these shares. And the first thing we're seeing is a view of the data, a profile of the data by its age. So we can see here, different shades in this green donut, and the lighter the green, the older the data. So we see that, about 13% of our data hasn't been touched in over 3 years, another 13% in over 2 years, and about 26% in over a year. And some data has been more recently accessed. This is pretty typical of most environments. In most environments, 50 to about 80% of the data has not been touched in over a year. And in addition to seeing that, we also get to see how fast data is growing on these shares based on the historical growth rates. So what this is showing us is that in 3 years, if we did nothing, the footprint on these shares will almost double because of the amount of data coming into the shares. In addition to this, you also get more detailed usage analytics on your data, so you can make some intelligent decisions about it. So you get to see what kind of data you have, and for each a distribution by age, so you can see where you want to target your efforts. We also get to see whether you have big files or small files, what's the distribution of your data by its size, who's using the data, which users, which groups, where is the data actually sitting, what are the top directories, top shares, etc. So different kinds of file analytics that help us better understand what's happening to our data, what data is actually being touched, what data is not being touched, and how data is growing. But all this analytics is great, but as we all know, in most environments, we're looking at petabytes of data, and we're looking at billions and billions of files, thousands and thousands of shares. So it's virtually impossible to manually pick data and move it around. It's untenable. So Komprise actually not only projects for you the analysis of what's happening so far, it also projects what will happen if you were to create some data management policies. And then when you like your policies, you can go ahead and activate them. Then it actually moves and manages data based on those policies. So to set your policies is really simple. On this left-hand pane, you can set different policy groups. In this example, we have a different policy for our remote offices, and a policy for some of our capacity shares, and a different policy for our performance shares. But you can set whatever policy groups you want. You can select which shares belong to that group, and you can select the criteria by which data will get moved from those shares or replicated, and to what targets. So for example, we have set up a bucket in Cloudian called Cloudian Home, and we're putting that as a target here. As Sanjay mentioned, Cloudian is fully S3 compliant. It has an S3 API. And so Komprise goes in through that API and puts data into Cloudian. And so you can set up as many buckets as you want in Cloudian, and then you can point Komprise at those buckets. You can also put a second copy somewhere else if you want to. And as you do this, you notice Komprise is actually projecting for you what will happen with that to your footprint if you were to implement this policy. How much capacity would be freed, how much of your backup would be reduced because you're no longer keeping that data in your active footprint, and how much it would save you. All these projections are interactive. So as I change these projections change. So let's try that. Let's say we want to be more aggressive. Maybe we want to move anything over 3 months old off these filers into the Cloudian bucket. So I just moved this to 3 months, and I don't know if you noticed, but all these numbers changed. So it's saying that now 72% of the data will get moved off based on the new policies. And that's going to free up 200 terabytes over 3 years. And not only that, because this footprint is no longer sitting on the primary NAS, it no longer needs to be replicated or snapshotted or backed up on the primary NAS because it's not changing. So it's going to reduce your secondary footprint by over 600 terabytes. And here's your cost savings. And all the numbers here are defined by a cost model, which you can change and put in your own costs so that you get a custom view of how things are happening in your environment. And once you like everything, once you've picked a plan you like and you've set policies that you like, the other important thing is that you can just go ahead and activate the plan, and then Komprise actually starts moving data based on your policies into Cloudian. But as it moves data, a few important things are that it doesn't sit in front of your data path, and it's completely invisible to your users and applications. So what happens is, many solutions that you may have looked at in the past that either analyze file shares or move data tend to be intrusive, meaning that when they're working, the file systems that they're operating on can be impacted because their own performance can slow down because this other solution is now crawling them. Komprise does not do that. Komprise is completely invisible to your environment, and it in fact runs under about 3.5% of the load on your environment, and it sits completely outside your hot data path. The reason for that is that Komprise is not sitting at your network or putting any agents on your storage. It's actually working through standard protocol paths. So what that means is that unlike other solutions that front your data path and hence are not ideal, Komprise is actually sitting behind your data path. So all the requests for data continue to go to your primary filer exactly as before. And 99% of the time, the requests are for hot data, and the filer just responds, and neither Cloudian nor Komprise are in that picture. But when it comes to data that Komprise has moved, only then does the filer get a request, and the filer forwards that request, and then Komprise responds to it and brings the data from Cloudian. And you can set your recall policies so the data may be kept in Cloudian and just returned as a file to the user, or based on, you could say, well, if it gets too hot, or if it gets written to, maybe write it back to the filer. So you can actually set those policies however you want, and Komprise will manage the recalls based on that. So essentially what you're getting is complete transparency. So here's a folder before we moved any data. Here's that same folder after we've moved data. And we've put these red rectangles here to show you what files we moved. But other than these rectangles that we added, actually you can't tell the difference, right? The files look the same after a move as they did before. That's because this is completely transparent. We're not putting any stub files, we're not putting any agents, we're not making any changes to your primary storage environment. What we're doing is using the notion of links that the file systems support. And if you right-clicked on this file and looked at its properties, all its access control would be the same, all the permissions would be the same. The only thing that would be different about it is its size on disk will be just a kilobyte, whereas maybe the original size was a few megs. Essentially, we're using a notion of links that the file systems support, and we're dynamically pointing to the moved object so that even if these links were to be ever deleted or corrupted, the data is always accessible and the links can be fully restored. So essentially, we are providing a non-intrusive, adaptive, scale-out, fault-tolerant solution that is working with your storage environment and transparently moving data based on your policies and providing seamless access to that data as files, and also preserving native access to that data as objects. So some of the key differences with our technology compared to what you may have looked at in the past are that, Komprise requires no storage agents, it requires no dedicated hardware, it doesn't put in any stub files, static stub files, it doesn't change the hot data path. You don't really need to manage Komprise, you just set it and forget it, because Komprise is adaptive. It throttles itself back if your file system is in active use or if your network is in active use, so that it's running under 3.5% of the load on your environment. So it's completely invisible to active usage. And really, there's no dedicated infrastructure needed to get the either Cloudian or Komprise set up. And there's no scaling limits. It's a complete scale out architecture. And the data that we move, you can access it as files from the source, as I showed you, or you can access it as objects in Cloudian. There's no lock-in. The other thing we wanted to mention is the cost overall, and we have a custom ROI calculation with Cloudian, but if you add the Cloudian costs and the Komprise costs, you can typically save over 70% compared to what you're doing today on the data that you move. So some of the things that we showed you here in this demo are how you can see what's happening in your primary storage environment, and see how you can understand and assess how much you could save before you even do anything. Just get an analysis of the projected ROI that you could get by leveraging Cloudian and Komprise, and then how you can actually reduce your tier 1 NAS costs by moving data intelligently, especially moving inactive cold data, and eliminating its secondary copies on primary storage, and how you can do all of this without having to ask for user permission, doing it completely transparently so users and applications see no change or disruption. We have customers across all the different industries. We have, as Cloudian mentioned, some of the industries that we work in are very similar to the ones Cloudian works in. So we have customers in media and entertainment, genomics and healthcare, financial services, oil and gas, and government, and any industry where data footprints are growing fast, and a lot of that data is unstructured, but IT is being asked to do more with the same, is a good fit for our joint solution, because essentially you're optimizing your data footprint based on the life cycle of the data without being locked into a storage life cycle. And this is a solution that lets you leverage your existing file-based investments in NFS and SMB SIVs and transparently incorporate object into the mix, object and cloud, without creating a paradigm shift for your users or applications. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sanjay, who can tell you a bit about how you could get started. And Sanjay, do you want to walk through?
Thank you, Krishna. And actually, that was a wonderful demo, right? If people are still trying to see where we can add value, that demo gave you a good insight into what is possible, right? An ability to even just look at your existing environment and have an understanding of what is happening in your storage. I know even just knowing that itself is a great start, right? So the question is, how do I get started? I would say the first thing you need to do is just take a look at your environment, right? Do a basic NAS storage assessment, right? look at your install, look at your existing NAS footprint, see how you're using the data. Get this insight. Even if you just do that assessment and report it down to your executives and your management, I think that gives you a good insight of where your investments have been. So, but if you ask me how do we get started, the first thing I would recommend is that, do this NAS assessment. Understand how much data you have across your storage, how much is being used, who's using it, how fast it's growing, what are the different possibilities that you have when you start looking at, if I move this storage out, how much can I save and how much more can I increase the life of my existing NAS boxes, right? And this is where the TCO analysis comes in, right? This is something that we can help you with. When you do this, we can run this assessment for you. We can give you a TCO analysis, which exactly tells you how much CapEx savings you're going to save, how much OpEx savings are you going to save because of the inherent nature of this solution that allows you to do a lot more than what you would have ever thought of, right? Integrated DR, the ability to tier to cloud, those things have significant value that brings, and this is not just a one-time thing. Keep in mind, if you do this, you will have view into your environment as when you start and as you keep using. So you can dynamically watch your environment and how it's changing and how it's growing and adjust those policies dynamically on the fly. What more can be asked for when you're looking for a new modern adaptive IT environment? So that is something that I would say get started. Now, the question is, as I mentioned, so what we have for you as part of this webinar is we have a free storage assessment for you, right? Like I said, right, the first step, that is the most important step, is to understand your environment, understand how the capacity and storage, and we will give you this for free, right? It's just a simple thing as Krishna showed in the demo. It takes 15 minutes. You install this. It gives you a view. It gives you a report. And I think that's what you should take advantage of, right? The solution works for CIFs, NFS, does not have any limits in terms of how much shares and how much storage we are talking about. Just point them to this particular offering from Komprise, and it'll give you a complete analytics of your existing storage, right? There doesn't need to be any hardware agent or software agent that needs to be installed. No changes to your users. So let's get you started with this free assessment offer. Go to the link that is out there, sign up, and we will reach out to you so that we can get you started. And once you are started, we'll give you a way to say, if you want to proceed further, let's do a complete TCO, and then let's put a plan in place on how you can make it happen. So my recommendation, again, get started, get your free assessment, and let's help you save money and delay your existing NAS environment and expansion. With that, we'll open up for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the app, in the GoToWebinar app, and put in your questions. We'll get back to you. If you want to unmute your phone lines and ask questions.
Great. So I would like to thank Krishna, Sanjay again for their time today, and for our audience for joining us. I also wanted to point out that we have included some content in the handouts panel that include the TCO report on NAS file tiering, as well as the comprised Cloudian solution brief and a few other pieces. So be sure to check those out. We do have time for questions. Don't be shy. Go ahead and fill those out in the question box. There are a couple here already, so I'll get started with those. And if you think of any more as we're going through these, please go ahead and enter them in. So first question is for Sanjay. Am I locked into one cloud storage vendor?
Absolutely not. So let me reiterate what I mentioned earlier in the slides, right? What we offer is give you an on-prem scalable storage that leverages object storage technology, right? We have standardized our access on object storage on an Amazon S3. That does not mean that you get locked into Amazon. We have the ability to tier to, if you need to, tier to any of the public clouds of your preference. We can tier it down to Amazon, we can tier it down to Google and also Microsoft Azure. And we can do more than one, right? So you are not locked in. This is your on-prem storage. The technology leverages, as I mentioned, object-based storage technology that allows you to scale, and that is the blueprint of our storage offering.
Great. So the next one, I believe, is for Krishna or for Sanjay. What happens when I have billions of files? How will Komprise and Cloudian scale?
Krishna, you want to take that, and then I can chime in on the backend side.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I'll speak on the Komprise side. You can absolutely scale. You can start with just a few terabytes of data and scale it to petabytes and petabytes of data. Really simply add more of these observer VMs. Each observer VM itself is multi-threaded, so you can handle a large amount of data with a single VM. But as your needs grow, you just add more of those observers on as you need them, and they load balance across one another, and they also provide redundancy and DR to one another. So you're essentially getting a fault-tolerant scale-out grid, and you're not charged by how many observers you use in your environment. So it is a very simple way to scale cost efficiently. And Sanjay,
yeah, so on the backend side, right? I've been saying this again, and I may sound like a broken tape, but the biggest challenge that the enterprises have today is that the existing NAS-based storage they may be good for offering all the full file capabilities, but when it comes to managing large amount of files, they don't scale. That's nothing to do with the NetApps of the world or the iClones. It's just that basic nature of file system. The way object storage works is you now create buckets with rich metadata, and that allows you to scale. This is why Amazon and all the public cloud use object-based storage to offer that scalable web scale, that term that has been used so often in the industry. To me, this is more like infinite storage, right? You just keep growing as and when your data, unstructured data grows, and still have the ability to manage it effectively, retrieve it, search for the data, and be able to still meet all your SLAs and data protection schemes. So that's the basic nature of this new age storage offerings, that it allows and meets all this scale.
Okay, great. Next question. I have my NAS structure in terms of users and groups. Will this be maintained?
That's that's a great question. I think Krishna, you showed this in the demo also, where now you can create custom policies and then be able to tier this or move this data to different buckets within Cloudian. This is something that we can do, right? As I mentioned in one of the feature sets that we talked about on the Cloudian offers multi-tenancy along with scale. So if your existing NAS filers are multi-tenant, we can preserve that multi-tenancy, right? You can still say, for this particular tenant, move this particular data into this buckets on Cloudian, which is also a multi-tenant solution. And within that multi-tenant solution, you can create multiple buckets for your object that can map to a particular shares or directory structure. So those things are possible, and it all depends on what the customer wants to get done and how we want to tier your data. Having said that, I think Krishna, from a user perspective, when the data is being tiered and moved, you will see the same data structures that you are used to, as Krishna showed in our demo, right? Those things don't change. Only the backend data is organized differently, and that also is customizable. Krishna, you want to join and chime in?
Yeah, exactly as you said, Sanjay. We preserve all the NTFS permissions on the data, so all the access controls, who the users, the groups, everything is fully preserved, as is the full directory path and structure. So it's all completely transparent, and there's no changes for the user or application access. Also, the question did not ask this, but you do have a choice from a security perspective of also encrypting data before it's being transferred. So we do support encryption at source or at rest, and you can choose, if you want to add further security on the data, to also encrypt it. But all the access controls for users and groups are fully preserved.
Okay, great. There's another one here. Can I get the free analysis on production file shares in POC?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of customers do point us at production data because you want to look at a subset of your actual data and understand, how useful our joint solution can be for you. So you can absolutely point it on production shares. And as I said before, we do adaptively throttle back so that there is no noticeable performance impact on your shares as we're doing our analysis. Users or applications won't even know that it's there. It's completely invisible.
Great. Well, it looks like there aren't any other questions coming in right at this time, but for anyone who is on the call, please feel free to reach out to us with any of those questions you might have and not entered in. Of course, you can check out our websites as well for more information. And remember that there is this free storage assessment offer. You can get to that on cloudian.com/free storage. Just sign up for there. It's really easy, 15-minute free assessment, and we'll get you started. So with that, thank you again to Krishna and Sanjay and to our audience, and we will let you have 10 minutes of your day back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks.